In this special episode of Inside Israel News, I'll be analyzing President Trump's speech before the joint session of Congress, talking about my thoughts and some of the central themes and reactions to the speech. Well, my friends, we heard a great speech last night. I'm trying to record this now so I can get you analysis right away. So this is going to be a short, special episode where I'm just talking about Trump's speech, and I'll go from there. Next episode, I can discuss some of the larger ramifications and impact on other events. But right now, let's just talk about this speech. I'd like to emphasize, first and foremost, that first of all, obviously, Trump is a great showman. He definitely knows how to put on a good show and leave you feeling good about yourself and your circumstances, unless you're a hater, I guess. But, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. It's just a show. I mean that, he was able to drive several very important themes in this speech, emotionally and with excellent examples that tell a story and remind us of who we are and what we're capable of, I think. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit here first. Then I'll go into some of the particulars and some of the politics of it, and then I'll wrap it up with my overall conclusions. One major theme that Trump wanted to push here is the American spirit. Overall, I think the goal is to talk about the American dream and America being back. Great theme, excellent speech. I mean, objectively, whether I supported Trump or not, I would say he did a good job and he got his point across, right? It happens that I do support 99% of his policies, so that makes it easier, I guess, to say that. But no, good speech. And very much on tone and on point with what's going on in the country. Not like the tone-deaf speeches we used to get from the last administration that were campaign speeches and an effort to try to rally their side. But so let's start with the positive. Let's just say Donald Trump brought guests who highlighted the American spirit and who provided excellent examples of what it means to be American and to persevere, and examples that are worthy of emulation, right? So one example, his first guest he cites is a steel worker from Alabama, a man with 7 children and who fostered more than 40 children, who made the time to be a volunteer firefighter. I mean, this is, an American hero, a great American. First of all, hardworking guy, right? Working in a steel mill is not easy work, and it takes skill and patience, and that's something that is laudable. That is something we want to celebrate. Having 7 children, as a father of 7 children, that is not easy, but it is definitely rewarding. And being a pillar of your community, is definitely important. And firefighters are heroes. They're people who are among our first responders, people who rush into burning buildings to save lives. There's no other word I can use to describe the incredible heroism of the blue and the firefighters and our other first responders, our EMTs in this country. And that's just an excellent example right there. So that was the first big one. A young man who has aspired to go to West Point, right, who worked very hard to get good grades, who competes very actively in sports, who's, just going all out, 100%. He's giving 100% to everything he's doing, clearly, right? And that's an excellent example of who we want at West Point to join our military and serve our country. And that's interesting that his dream is just that. Like he has the drive clearly to do all kinds of things, yet his goal is to serve and protect, right, the rest of us. What an incredible moment to find out that you've been accepted to West Point to join the Gray Line, as the president accurately said, from the President of the United States during a joint address to Congress. I think that was just incredible. The most, saving the best for last, a cancer survivor, a little boy who, regardless of what you think of police officers in general or particular officers whom you think may have done the wrong thing or whatever, This is a boy who has survived cancer, and his one passion is that he wants to be a police officer. And so to encourage him and to give him the strength to keep fighting this deadly illness and to keep persevering and not give up, several law enforcement agencies have made him an honorary officer. And there he was in his uniform. Forgive me, my friends, it's emotional for me even now. What an incredible story. And then, he becomes an honorary member of the Secret Service, or not even honorary. He becomes a Secret Service agent right then and there. What an incredible thing. That isn't right, that isn't left, it isn't up or down. That is just an incredible human story. And to have, the other side booing and attacking the whole police officer thing. Come on, people. Do you have any decency? Oh, my God. But these are examples. These three examples are incredible representations of the American spirit, that pioneering spirit of driving, giving our all for something, being pillars of our community, working hand in hand with our fellow men and women to make this country better, right? Whether it's fighting for your life against a deadly illness, whether it's giving your all to serve your country and serve others, or working hard and serving your community, right? And taking care of your family. These are all examples that we can recognize as positive examples and worthy of emulation and imitation, right? Just incredible and moving, right? And I'm going to talk about the politics a little later, but honestly, if you're the Democrats, these are the people you want to vote for you, right? You want those steel workers to be voting blue, right? You want cancer survivors and the people who, have dealt with deadly illness. You want those people voting blue, right? You want people who are persevering to join the military to feel that you would be good leaders. In other words, if you want to win elections, you want to appeal to exactly these kinds of demographics. So I don't understand the enmity. Well, I do understand the enmity, but you get the point. You could be forgiven for not understanding the enmity that was shown these people. Now, going on from there, obviously the president contrasted that with the horrors of the previous administration's incompetence. It's easy to hear statistics like, 13 soldiers died in an incident today in Afghanistan, right? To hear, crime is up overall because of illegal immigrants, and people argue with these facts, right? It's one thing to hear that. It's another thing to look at the parents who are Gold Star families, who should not be, right? Whose children died because of incompetent leadership, and no one cared. Donald Trump cared, thankfully, and there's a great personal story about how he helped the families of those 13 servicemen and women who were lost. But the point is, he's showing people, look, this is the pain. Look at these people. Look in their eyes. This is the pain that is caused by the incompetent government and by bad policymaking. The family of Laken Riley, who lost their daughter because of someone who shouldn't have been in the country in the first place. Monsters who should never have crossed our border, who would never have been allowed to cross our border legally. But because the borders were left wide open by the previous administration, the family of Jocelyn, that was a horrible, horrible story that touched so many people and really, really cut me when I heard that story. I go into the details. It's horrifying. But you see that family's pain, right? And to see, now there's a nature preserve that will be named in Jocelyn's honor, still a thing. Your gregarious Vulcan, not being very Vulcan today, kind of, again, this is kind of emotional stuff. A good friend of mine, she was messaging me, she was joking, she's like, I'm bawling my eyes out here, Isaac. Every time I get my face dry, I finally calm down a little bit. Trump does another thing, and I'm starting. And he got me a couple of times. It's really incredible stuff. How you cannot, empathize and feel for these families. So again, yes, he's a good showman, but here he is showing us examples of the great American spirit and examples of the terrible harm done to the American spirit, by these bad policies, by incompetence. So what a contrast. And, I think personally that he was rather respectful about it. given given the pain caused by those bad policies, I think Trump's rhetoric would have been justifiable if it had been much more hateful about the Biden administration. I think he handled it in a very classy, a good friend of mine said classy, getting good feedback on the speech from some people I know. Very classy presentation. He handled that very well. So that's the moving part. Let's see here. Let's go into some of the politics. I mean, obviously, the Democrats are not going to agree with Trump's policies, his talking about things that Bobby Kennedy is going to do, Jr., really glad that they were able to build that coalition. We don't have many coalition governments in America. There is a tradition of occasionally having another, a member of the other party in the administration, right? Bill Clinton had Republican secretaries of defense. George Bush had a Democrat secretary of transportation. So, I mean, you have, this has happened. But this time it was really a coalition. Like the RFK's movement really came together with the Trump movement and their concerns, things like chronic illness. A lot of the issues that Bobby Kennedy has championed are now being addressed. And Trump talking about researching autism. Why not? Why not go and research these things? Like, it's one of the things I thought Bobby Kennedy really had going for him is like, why don't we talk about chronic illness? Why are cancer rates going up? Why are, more kids being diagnosed with autism? Is it just that we've discovered it and the definition of autism keeps being broader? Okay, that's one possible explanation. Does that bear out in the statistics? To some degree, it will. Is there something in the environment causing it? Is there something in, one of the things we noted back when I used to do my young brother having autism and being somewhat mildly autistic, so it's something that touches my own life, is that older parents, we're seeing a connection between older parents and especially older fathers and more autism. Does it mean that, people having children later is leading to a higher likelihood of autism? Is that just a contributing factor? Is that the case for a quarter of the people who are diagnosed with autism, or is it the case for 99%? I mean, let's study this. Let's really get to the bottom of it. And whatever the issue is, and whatever can be done to treat it and whatever, let's do it. I mean, it's brainlessly, mindlessly, it's mind-numbingly simple to say, hey, let's get our brain trust together. We have a great brain trust in this country, and let's go attack these problems. Okay? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with having more scrutiny of vaccines and medications? If those vaccines and medications really are as good as we are told, then there shouldn't be a problem. The fact that there is a problem, that there's great opposition to that, tells us more likely it's the opposite that's the case. We should know that our food and drugs and what have you, vaccines, are safe, right? And when a large part of the population doesn't have confidence in that, let's restore that confidence. He talked about Elon Musk. I mean, now the Doge clock is up over $160 billion that they've saved. So much waste, God. And we know there are, trillions of dollars of payments that have gone overseas from our entitlement programs, Medicare and Social Security in particular. Trump cited the age thing. I think the overall theme, and he's talking about the wasteful spending on, promoting LGBTQ whatever and Lesotho and then transgender mice. I mean, while those are comically obvious examples of stupid spending, his point overall, especially with the Doge thing, our government is doing a lot of stupid stuff, not just regulations that harm the economy, wasteful and stupid spending, all this kind of stuff, things that most Americans agree on across the board. All of us can agree that transgender mice is a waste of our money, right? Money that could be spent on national security, money that could be in tax cuts, giving in our back pocket. And God, if millennials, people my age, millennials are in their late 30s and 40s now, early 40s, the oldest of us, we're starting to think about maybe retiring someday. Wouldn't that be nice? I'd very much like Social Security to be solvent. I think it would be good if Medicare still exists, don't you think? I mean, isn't that worth trying to, do something? Anyway, so the point is, he's talking about this waste and all this stuff. And I think most people can agree that that's bad stuff. And that's why, the Doge thing is actually rather popular. The Dems have really gone after Musk on this, everything they can throw at him. He's stealing, he's cheating, he's whatever, he's a Nazi. They've said everything they can about Elon Musk. He's a Nazi who's made a life about fighting climate change and, traveling to Mars. Okay, I mean, if you say so, if those are Nazi policies, then the left needs to take a look at itself, I think. All right. So all that kind of good stuff. Talk about the tariffs. Now, the tariffs are a double-edged sword because on the one hand, we know that tariffs can cause harm to our economy. Yes, they will in the short term raise our prices and certain things and that kind of thing. We all know that. We're aware of that. And, at the same time, there are long-term benefits. Getting all of these companies that he cited, Apple, Taiwan chips being made here, Taiwanese chips being made here, cars, Honda building a new plant, these kinds of things. All that investment coming back to the U.S., that is worth every penny because that means American jobs, it means American opportunities, and no tariffs, right? You build here in the U.S. of A, no tariffs. And he's pointing out there's no public money behind that. Like we're not paying like the CHIPS Act. We're not paying to build. Federal government doesn't have to pay to build chip plants. Private companies will build chip plants and car plants and make iPhones here in the U.S. of A. If we have the right tariffs and the right policies. Those policies are incredibly popular with the UAW, with the auto workers, with several unions, the steel workers unions. Again, the kind of people you would think the Democrats want to get back. Those used to be Democrat voters right there. But the UAW even put out a statement thanking Donald Trump for the tariffs, which, my grandfather was a lifetime member of the UAW and, worked at a Ford Motor Company plant in California. And my grandfather eventually switched sides politically as he got older, but he kept complaining about how the UAW, they're so left wing, they've got their heads up there. Anyway, the point is, that organization being willing to thank Trump for the tariffs, that's exactly what he's looking for. And many of these tariffs won't last. Eventually, we'll negotiate. Trump put forward an incredible policy recently of reciprocal tariffs, basically saying if you're putting tariffs on us, we'll put the same tariffs on you. Well, that's a formula for free trade, actually. So, if you're a free trader, you should support that because then you're saying, look, if South Korea, for example, has a 10% tariff on our cars and we put a 10% tariff on their goods, it incentivizes them to reduce or eliminate the tariffs on our goods such that we will then reduce or eliminate tariffs on theirs. So, again, that promotes free trade, freer trade, because then, immediately these countries, South Korea, Japan, they're going to look at those tariffs, they're going to assess the value of them, and they're going to lower them because they want to get their goods sold overseas. And that's going to benefit us and our exports, as well as bringing in, less expensive goods that help keep the cost of living down here. Yes, building, manufacturing things in America is expensive. Trump is making it less so with his tariff policy. And a lot of times, as we've seen with Mexico and Canada in particular, the threat of tariffs precedes some kind of policy demand. President Trump highlighted how he got on the phone with President Sheinbaum of Mexico, and all of a sudden we've had, 24 really nasty cartel criminals turned over to us, to our jurisdiction, which would never have happened if under the previous administration, right? But, this is another example of Trump pushing someone. I've told you guys, because I've talked about it several times here, that, Mexico is losing its sovereignty to these cartels. AMLO, the previous president, didn't do much about it. And there's been very little evidence that President Sheinbaum was going to do anything about it either. There's also the issue of the fentanyl. It is widely suspected that China is responsible for assassinating some 37 center-right candidates in Mexico to prevent them from running for president and possibly winning in the hopes of maintaining the status quo. And so, Donald Trump is literally fighting China with tariffs against Mexico, getting Mexico to crack down on the cartels and treating the cartels as the terrorists that they rightly are. So here we go. Now we're fighting that, and that's an excellent example there. And I know Canadians are really upset about tariffs and what have you, but again, popular with the auto workers, popular with union workers. So there's that. All right. With regard to Israel, there wasn't much there. I mean, Trump did mention getting the hostages back, and that is a really important point that he made about working to get Americans out of Gaza and back from Hamas. But he didn't have a lot to say there. Obviously, the administration has been very supportive of Israel. Rubio's found $4 billion in aid that wasn't sent, and that's going to be sent. We're sending, more than twice the number of bombs that the Biden administration was withholding. So, I mean, our relationship there is pretty solid. Moving on to talking about politics, Representative Green from Texas made a ridiculous display of, going out there and attacking the president and yelling and screaming and heckling and refusing to shut up when, we had to have the Speaker of the House, who's technically presiding over the proceedings, interrupt the president's speech to, call for order. And then, he threatened, he said, if the House will not be in order, the Speaker will direct the Sergeant of Arms to restore order. And finally he did. He did say, Sergeant of Arms will restore order, and, kicked a congressman out of the hall. And he's supposedly whining about Medicaid or something like that. Look, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, they're all headed for bankruptcy. So the work that Elon Musk is doing, reducing the fraud and the waste, and the painful choices we're going to have to make in some of those areas, trimming back some of those benefits to preserve those programs, that's all to make sure that those will still be there, right? So if my grandchildren want to have the benefits of Medicaid if they need it, if I'm going to have Medicare available to me, Social Security for me, right, then these programs need some shoring up. And we better do it now because bankruptcy is right around the corner. I mean, Social Security is going to run out of money sometime in the 2030s, and that's after repeated efforts to prop it up. Anyway, okay, so that display was ridiculous, having to be thrown out. I'm not aware, and it'd be interesting to find out. I did ask Grok and checked with AI to see, because I can't remember a member of Congress being thrown out of a presidential address. Now, some have walked out in the past, but hey, if you walk out, that's your protest, whatever. I don't, so that's your problem. Guests of members of Congress have been thrown out before. In particular, one guest who heckled Biden, one of the Gold Star families who lost, their child as a service member in Afghanistan. But a member of Congress having to be thrown out. I mean, and the way the Democrats behaved was so childish. I mean, they wouldn't stand and clap for anything. There are things we agree on, right? I mean, there have to be. There has to be something where they might cross the aisle and stand up and clap. And a boy who survived cancer, who doesn't applaud for that? My God. I'm hearing a lot of people say they think that the Democrats lost 26 and 28 tonight with their behavior. Let's just say that between the last election and the poor performance tonight, the Democrats have done themselves no favors. One of the things that, people have short memories, generally speaking, but once you get a negative impression in your mind, it can be really, really hard to convince you otherwise, right? I mean, think about that. You go to a restaurant and you have a bad experience there. How long does it take you? You might not remember that particular bad experience, but when you think about going out to eat and that restaurant, hey, well, we haven't been there in a while, that bad experience will stick with you. Even if you're not really cognizant of it, you'll still feel like, I don't really like going there to eat that restaurant. I don't really like these political leaders, aspiring political leaders. So I think they really did themselves a discredit. Slotkin's response was fairly professional. I mean, obviously the woke could have been much worse. I will say, listening to, so I watched the live stream from CBS. It was the first result on YouTube, excuse me, where I just listened live. Honestly, the stream inside the House is the same stream. Like no one has cameras in there. The House has its own cameras, and no one's allowed to film in there except for those cameras, these official ones. So everyone's watching the same stream. Right, so it doesn't really matter where you're watching it. But I did enjoy the commentary before the speech and right afterwards from some of the people at CBS. I mean, they were just they were beside themselves at how horrible it was that Donald Trump is president, and they tried to make themselves sound professional, but you could hear it in their voices that they would rather be talking about Kamala Harris having this historic, black woman president, this kind of nonsense. That's where they'd rather be. But having to talk about this instead. And one of the points that was made by one of the commentators ahead of time was that, commenting that, Democrats are saying that their constituents are calling on them to stand up and do more to resist Trump's agenda. And they've got to find a way to do a better job fighting this. And I'm sitting here listening to this, face palm, head in my hand, like, wow, people, talk about, you don't get it. If that's what your constituents are telling you, you need to tell your constituents to grow up, because there was an election, and the election was as much a repudiation of the left as it was an election of Donald Trump. I mean, the Democrats lost as much as Trump won, right, in equal measures. Right, this was a defeat for them and a win for us. It wasn't just one of those things. Hey, we had two good candidates and we just thought that one was a little better than the other by a hair. Right? Okay, it wasn't that kind of situation here. Right? It was like, we want those people to lose and we want this guy to win. That was distinctly how the election went. So, something has to give here. Like, they have to acknowledge their failing somehow. And John Fetterman's been trying to talk about this. Like, you can't ask people to deny the reality of their senses, of their eyes, right? And, it doesn't take a yid, to be smart enough to say, look, people, you can't deny your senses. Do not, deny the evidence of your eyes. Okay. If a statue is just a statue and an idol, and it doesn't have any magical powers, right? That's from our from the script, from the Bible. Anyway, so the fact is, if people are experiencing higher crime and they know people who've been hurt by criminal aliens, then you are not going to convince them that everything is hunky dory, right? So there's that. So again, they don't seem to have any kind of credible opposition. There are things they should be supporting, rebuilding infrastructure, trimming the government. These are things that are easy to get behind, right? Preserving the social safety net. I mean, the Democrats should be all on board, and there's an easy way to handle that rhetorically. We're the Democrat, we're all for the social safety net and preserving it. We want to make sure it's financially sound. We have some disagreements with the president over the particular details. We want to make sure we protect the little guy and stick up for those who are needy. But we're willing to work with the president and negotiate and figure out, precisely what, details of the. That's an easy thing to do, and that puts you in a position where you're no longer just, out there screaming your head off about trans rights and this kind of nonsense, but you're instead sounding like an intelligent person who might have some minor disagreements with the president over the particulars of a given policy, right? I mean, how hard is that? I'm sorry, people. How nuts do you have to be not to see this? As you guys know, I have a few disagreements with the president's approach to certain things and means to ends, and a few ends here and there myself. But, I don't go out there and, like screaming woke, whatever, oh my God. Yeah. I mean, you can't do that. You have to have some kind of, logical thought process and, particular things you disagree. Anyway, so the Democrats did not do a good job of representing themselves last night, and they did nothing to help themselves with the electorate. Already across the country, especially in swing states, erstwhile swing states, because I don't know that, like I've talked about, I don't think Georgia and North Carolina will be considered swing states in the next election. And looking at some of the voter registration numbers in Arizona and Pennsylvania, the Democrats are in deep trouble there too. So if they want to stop the bleeding, they need to grow up a little bit. And we didn't see any of that. So let me move on to the final topic here. As you know, because my listeners, I've got a couple emails from you guys, and I hear you. I know you guys have some differences of opinion with me over the president's approach to Ukraine. Some of you, not all, but I've had some positive feedback. I had to vent my frustration in the last episode at the means to the end and this kind of thing. Because otherwise I'm not being honest with you. I have to be honest. And look, people will disagree, and I don't have to like the way things are being done or how things necessarily finally turn out precisely. Like I can have minor disagreements with this or that. And I have had this overarching concern about the lack of morality on the woke right. People like your Tucker Carlsons and this guy Daryl Cooper, and nutterism is unwelcome right and left. However, obviously that doesn't represent the broad sweep of the MAGA movement. Most Trump supporters, most Republicans are, moral and sensible people. So I'm very concerned that there'll be some effort to drag us away from being moral people. That's what I was talking about the last episode. Trump presented an extremely moral vision tonight and couched his speech in very moralistic terms. And I just want to say, he blew me away. All right. So I'm not going to say, so I'm not wrong to be concerned about the issue, especially with people, in extremis. Okay. But I'm going to say, I think I'm wrong to have thought of it in broader terms. I am less concerned today than I was yesterday. Let's put it that way. Because Donald Trump, the leader of this particular movement, has presented a moral vision and couched his rhetoric in moral terms that are relatable. We can look at the speech, we can look at the morality of the speech, and it's flawless. Okay, now I disagree with him over the Ukraine issue, which I'm going to come to next. In particulars, in the details, as one might. But I just want to say right there, that was awesome. That, again, that restoration of those moral terms of, putting things in a moral framework. Beautifully done, Mr. President, and I'm completely on board. I'm no longer concerned. I'm still going to call out some of the nutters to the woke right, but I'm much less concerned about that now than I was yesterday. I don't think that's such a big concern. It's really important that we understand our moral correctness. That's really important to the righteousness of this country. We are here. I've talked about it, I get on a high horse about it, but like the people who came here and settled this country originally saw themselves as sort of neo-Israelites in a new promised land, and couched their migration in those kinds of biblical terms. And we should acknowledge that as Americans, we have this divine mission, a certain chosenness, let's say, to represent the divine and to be moral people. Beyond a doubt. And I've talked about in my other podcast, the Mensch-Kight show, where I'm able to talk about history and just broader topics, miscellaneous topics, that, the framers of this country didn't just do what they did, setting up this republic because they thought it was more, ideologically correct. They did it as Christians. It was part of their belief in their religion that, that this country be established in just a certain way. Right. It was not in spite of religion. It was a result of their religious beliefs that led to this country being the way it is. That conviction, especially of George Washington, in the spirit of Cincinnatus, of giving his sword back and making sure that America would be a republic. He was happy to take his seat as the president, the duly elected president of a legal and constitutionally structured republic. He was not willing to be a dictator or, God help us, a king. Right. And that's, that his belief in that and the belief of that founding generation is their greatest contribution, their greatest legacy, their belief in natural rights and republicanism and all of that, right? And that is alive and well in Trump's speech and, all this nonsense about, Trump's destroying America. No, he's right on point. right on point there on that. So I just wanted to clarify that. I realized listening to my episode playback, I don't hear myself when I'm talking. I may have sounded a bit harsh in the last episode on the moral issue. It worries me, my friends. It really does. Morality is extremely important, and we have to keep clarity on that. We cannot allow ourselves to stray to the left or to the right of that. Stay straight down the path. You sleep better at night, walking the moral path. Okay. On the Ukraine issue, I would like to note, first of all, Trump's only mention of Vladimir Putin directly was in reference to the Biden administration's botched withdrawal from Afghanistan and how that made us so weak that even Putin thought he could invade Ukraine. He could get away with it, right? So he's not attacking Putin. Obviously, he wants to get the guy to negotiate. And I'm going to talk more about the strategy in the next full episode. But it looks to me like the strategy here is to lull Putin into a sense of false confidence where he will establish a ceasefire and then to drive negotiations, drive a hard bargain at negotiations. But to get the ceasefire, Putin really has to think that it's going to work to his advantage. Man, I don't know if this will work, but it is an interesting strategy. Trump is always great with strategy. Okay, it's an interesting strategy. But if you look at the events, the fireside spat, as we're calling it, in the Oval Office with Zelensky, Trump repeating the Russian-esque propaganda in his tweet that he later kind of disowned. Did I call him a dictator? Did I say that? That kind of thing. That would seem to give Putin the impression that maybe he'll get some of the things he wants. And then, we would have to go to the negotiating table. And obviously people like Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor, these are not people who want to surrender Ukraine. So those will be the people doing the negotiation. But if a ceasefire can be established and a peaceful situation prevailed, then say British and French troops might arrive. And if they arrive during the ceasefire and before a formal peace agreement is there, it will be a much different position because going back to war won't really be an option, will it? Just a thought. I mean, now that Europe seems to be getting there. Anyway, again, in all of that rhetoric and talking about leaving NATO, also, while it emboldens China too, the Chinese want to see NATO broken up as well, it's also driving the Europeans to increase defense spending and stand up for those. Anyway, it's an interesting strategy. I don't like it. I don't have to like it. If it results in positive ends, I'm willing to trust. Like I said, I have some faith. I will trust in Donald Trump to come to a reasonable agreement here. I hope that faith is warranted. So then, the last thing, of course, he read the statement from Zelensky. Very professional, very classy. No mention of the falling out and the argument. Stayed on the positive. He just read Zelensky's statement about, thanking America and willingness to support the mineral deal and that kind of thing. Again, very well handled, very positive. And right after that, there was a very important moment where he said, Pocahontas would keep this war going another 5 years and this kind of thing. And Elizabeth Warren was smiling and clapping, and it was a lighthearted. It's obviously a dire subject, but for in a political context, it was a lighthearted moment where the president and a leading opposition member figure had a little laugh about policy. We need more of that, my friends. We've got to take this down a notch. All of this, oh my God, the world is ending and democracy is being destroyed. And I mean, everyone take a deep breath. It's time to grow up a little bit. We need to be the adults in the room. That might be asking too much of Congress. But, can we try a little bit? But, it was a little bit of humor. And that, like that I talked about, the video of Ted Cruz and Amy Klobuchar joking back and forth about a few things. Obviously, opposite ends of the political spectrum represented there. We need to tone it down. We need to laugh a little. And so I really appreciated that moment because when Trump makes up these names and does these things, people are, he's such a hater, he's such a bigot. It's not intended like that. He's joking with people. Okay, when he wants to be hateful, he will. Rocket Man. Okay, when he makes these things, it's a little bit of humor mostly. He's just being funny about it. Okay, and it's his own particular way. But if we can take it down a notch, right, and just have a little bit of a laugh, a little bit of humor. I mean, I would say the biggest failing, the Democrats, where they had no humor and they had no heart at this particular thing. Like they didn't care about a boy who survived cancer or the victims of their policies, to whom they should be, really, hat in hand, hanging heads. I'm sorry, Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, that you had that loss. I see now that the policies I supported were wrong. I was morally wrong, and I apologize. And I will do what I can to make up for it now, which is all you can do is repent, right? Repentance is the most you can do. But anyway, so Trump handled all that well, would like to see more humor and lightheartedness. The Democrats did nothing to try to get my vote. I mean, they should be trying. I happen to agree overwhelmingly with Trump, but I'm not going to say it's impossible that I could, if they would make an effort, I would certainly appreciate it. And while I might not change my vote, because I'm probably not, I'm far too moralist to support their side at this point, a lot of other people might be swayed, but they're not even trying. At this point, they are still playing to their hard nutter woke crowd, and that's going to hurt them. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is speaking directly to the American people. He's speaking to their minds. He's speaking to their hearts. He's appealing to our souls, if you want to call it that, to our sense of morality and our relationship to the higher power. And the Democrats are just speaking craziness and hate and obstructionism, and that is not good for them. So, great speech. I came away from it feeling good. Had lots of people calling me, and I was able to catch up with a few people and email back a few people here and there. Appreciate the feedback and the thoughts, and you'll just have to forgive the tone of the last episode. I wanted to make those points, and I wanted to make them before this speech because I knew this was likely to be the case, that we would see these things. So I've made my warnings. You've heard them if you've listened to the episode, and now we can take a chill pill. I will take a chill pill for sure, relax a little bit, and I'm much more confident in the moral direction of our leadership, our movement, and our country. I will say I'm giving Trump the benefit of the doubt on the Ukraine issue, that somehow that will work out. And as I said, I mean, morally speaking, if the West doesn't have the will to stop Vladimir Putin or do anything more than what we've done already, then there's no point in keeping the fighting going, because we're not going to win it at this point. We'd have to do more. Well, if we're not willing to do more, then we've got to stop it somehow, if that's possible. And again, that requires the cooperation of people like Vladimir Putin, and he may not cooperate. And if he doesn't, I would not want to be Vladimir Putin when he ticks off Trump, when Trump has had the last straw. So we'll see. He would do well to play the game and negotiate in good faith. So with that, I will say, as always, goodbye, Lahitrot.